Grout is the unsung hero of mosaics. It fills the spaces, stabilises every piece, and quietly decides whether your mosaic comes together beautifully or falls completely flat. Because grout doesn't just finish your work, it defines it. In this guide, you'll learn how to choose the right grout for your materials and project, mix it to the perfect consistency, apply it with confidence, finish your piece cleanly and professionally, and troubleshoot the most common problems that beginners face. Grout is more than something that just fills the gaps. It locks your tesserae into place, protects your substrate, prevents moisture from creeping in underneath, and visually connects or separates every piece. Think of grout as both structure and design. There are three main types of grout. Unsanded grout, best for small gaps, smooth, gentle, perfect for glass and delicate work. Sanded grout, stronger, more durable, ideal for wider gaps and outdoor pieces. Epoxy grout, waterproof, stain resistant, incredibly strong, but more advanced to use. Choosing grout starts with one question: where will your mosaic live? Outdoors? You need durability and often sealing. Indoors, you have more freedom to focus on aesthetics. For functional surfaces like tables or floors, strength isn't optional, it's essential. This is where everything changes. Grout colour can completely transform your piece. Light grout softens, blends, creates a dreamy little finish. Dark grout adds contrast, finds shapes, and makes colours pop. Neutral grout steps back, letting your tesserae take the spotlight. And sometimes, grout becomes art itself. Layered, tinted, expressive. Used to guide the eye, create depth, even paint with colour between the pieces. Getting the consistency right changes everything. You're aiming for a thick, smooth paste, like peanut butter. So firm enough it's going to hold its shape, but soft enough that it's spreadable. So an important note, if it's too watery, it's going to cause cracks once it dries. The reason for this is because when you're mixing cement or grout, it has molecules that connect together. If you don't have the right amount of solids to water mixture, if you have too much water, there's not enough solids to connect together. So when it dries, it separates and cracks because the gaps evaporate into the water. If it is too dry, so there's too much powder, not enough moisture, what happens is the molecular structure inside doesn't have enough moisture to be able to bond together properly. So what happens when it dries, they are separate pieces and they become crumbly. So if you have the right consistency of moisture and powder, the molecular structure is that perfect state where it can bond properly. And when it dries, because it does shrink a bit, slightly, because it's losing the moisture through evaporation, what's going to happen is if you've got the right consistency of moisture, the space in between has enough that it stretches slightly, but still keeps that connection. Okay? Chemistry! So, if it's too watery, you're going to get cracks. If it's too dry, it won't bond properly. Okay? So, add water slowly and make sure you mix thoroughly before you add the next little batch of water. Okay? And trust the texture. Now, application. So, back to texture. It should be consistently smooth. You should be able to mix it through. There shouldn't be visible bumps. There shouldn't be visible variation. It should be consistent all the way through, where you mix it and you should be able to spread it like peanut butter. Okay. So, application. Here's where you get to spread it like peanut butter. So, what you're going to do is you're going to grab the grout and spread it across the surface. If you're going to use your hands, which a lot of people love and it's quite tactile, cover with gloves, grout is tiny powder that gets in everything, so it stains. Okay, it will stain you as much as it will stain everything else. So protect your surface with some cardboard or outside is even better. And gloves for your hands. Okay, so spread it across the surface. If you're using a trowel or a palette knife or some kind of object, anyway, 45-degree angle. So you've got a build-up, and as you're scraping it in, it should minimise as you're going through. Okay, so you know when your gaps are filled because you're putting pressure on this 45-degree angle, and you're going through, and your build-up stays there. Okay, that's because there's not enough space left because it's already full. So that's a good time when you. If you keep going over and it disappears, you just need to keep adding more until that build-up doesn't disappear in your hands. Okay, trowel, palette knife, however you're applying it, it's up to you. Try different things, see what works for you. So yes, you'll know it's working when the gaps stop drinking the grout and everything stays filled. So work in sections and don't rush. So for a first one, you should be starting with something small. Don't start with a mural. It is quite overwhelming to grout. I've sat there and cried before because I've done such a large space at once. Don't overwhelm yourself. Just do small sections at a time. Okay? Learn from my experience. Okay, so you've got two different types of grout removal techniques. You've got the wet technique, which is you grab, so you've put your grout on. You've got it covered, nice build up around the front and around the edges. You wait for about half an hour. Past that, you seem to get like, it'll dry on top of the tiles, and in between the grout it'll be slightly darker. So that's when you know it's about ready for you to use your wet sponge. Squeeze out the excess and then go over. Regularly rinse your sponge. It is going to be filled with gross stuff and you're going to have to rinse out your bucket quite regularly as well, okay? Try not to push too hard into the gaps because you're going to pull out the excess from the gaps because the sponge will flex out and pull out more than what you want it to, because it's a sponge, it expands and pulls. Anyway, don't make it too wet either. So if you make it too wet, it's going to pull out too much more, and then you've got the whole wet grout problem situation with cracking, things like that too, okay? Wet. So you've gone over your sponge 30 million times, dirty water 30 million times, and you're fine, and it dries, and you've got a dry haze over it. So to get rid of the dry haze, what you do is paper towel, and you do nice circular motions to buff the face of your tiles. Go around the edges. Okay, so you're doing this probably about an hour after you're finished your wet grout removal. Alright, so you buff it and the face, and then you let that cure before your next stage. Okay, you've also got the dry grout removal method, which I prefer because I got a bit more control than what I do with the wet method, but it is also more difficult and time consuming. So once again, try both things and see what works for you. Okay, so for the first, wet method's probably the best because it's easier. Once you get a bit more, once you want to challenge yourself a bit more, try the dry method. Okay, so dry method, you apply like you would the wet method. All right, so you've applied your grout, it's all filled up, so the face is all filled, all nice and overflowing. Around the edges is all nice and overflowing as well. Okay, so it's nice and filled. You're going to take stuff away, you're not going to put back on, you know, that kind of overfilled. Make sure you have waited half an hour from when you've applied the grout. That is about your sweet spot. So when you push on it, it's going to move, but when you lift your finger away, there's no grout on your finger. Okay, so you grab your wooden paddle pop stick. The reason why we use a wooden paddle pop stick is because I've used my stainless steel palette knives before, and it does damage the face of your tiles as you're scraping away, and it kind of shaves off the corners of the tiles so it's quite vicious to your tesserae. So wood being the softer material, depending on what tesserae you're using. I'm using tiles. Once again, it's all dependent on material, but wood being the softer material should be the bit that gives way to your tesserae compared to the stainless steel. So use the wood popsicle stick to scrape away the excess. What you're scraping away, push back into the gaps if you find cracks or any pieces that you've missed. So the excess that you scrape away after you've pushed it into the grout and there's no gaps left, you can scrape off and put into your grout container to save for the next stage. So you can scrape off the excess, smooth around the edges as well, smooth around the face, okay? And then you've got your paper towel, scrunch it up, nice circle motions, nice and gentle around the edge, around the face, okay? So as you're doing this scraping motion, you want to work from the outside edge inward. So we do this because if we're working out that way, we're going to push pieces off. And I quite regularly push pieces off. So work from the outside inwards. So that way the grout and the other tiles are taking the pressure away from you, away from that tesserae instead of falling off, okay? So inwards, away from the edge, scraping your grout, and then with your paper towel, buffing it up. So this is at the stage where a lot of people would finish, okay? I like to go a little step further and water down my grout. Grab a soft bristled brush, short bristled, soft brush. Water down my grout slightly. So it's more like a sauce as opposed to a peanut butter. And then you load up your paintbrush and you do circle work, pushing it up the edges of the tesserae, filling up the gaps, filling up any minor cracks that you might not have noticed too. I really like to do this stage a good 8 hours after I have done my paper towel buff. That way, if any cracks come up, then I can fix them at the time. Any issues that come up, I can fix at the time. Your grout will house itself will store quite well in an airtight container. I've found every colour I've used except for black. Black doesn't like to be stored. Black likes to get used and then get thrown away. So black doesn't want to play. Every other colour seems to be pretty good though. So buffing with your brush to fill up the sides of the tesserae, making it all nice and smooth. So for delicate work, there's a quieter technique. A soft paintbrush, perfect for intricate designs or tight spaces, and those final intentional details of correction or just smoothness. So to protect your work, sealing matters. So seal your grout after 48 to 72 hours of it curing. So this is the same as the adhesive. If you smother the grout before it's cured, that moisture isn't allowed to escape, and so it affects the molecular construction of it. So you want to seal your grout to prevent stains, moisture, and wear over time. I find if I don't seal my grout, if I run my fingers over, it actually leaves a chalky residue. So if I seal my grout and I run my fingers over, it's glued it all together essentially and protected it all, so none of that comes off and it's got a nicer texture, my personal preference. So it is a small step that adds years to your mosaic's life. So most grout issues come down to 3 things. Incorrect consistency. Like we said before, too watery, it's going to shrink and it's going to crack. Too dry, it's not going to get the molecular bonds that it needs and it's just going to fall apart and crumble as it dries. Rushing the process. So hurrying it, rushing things through, you're going to have cracks, inconsistencies, imperfections. If you take your time with it, you know your final product is going to be the best that it could possibly be. And not cleaning properly. It is essentially a liquid stone that forms into a stone. So once it's set, it is very hard to clean up. So keep that in mind and do a very good thorough job of cleaning while you can before it's too late. And you know what? All of them technically are fixable. When you grout, that's the moment that your mosaic becomes whole. It turns fragile pieces into something solid, something lasting, something that can live for years or even centuries. So take your time here, because this isn't just the final step. It's the one that brings everything together. When you're ready, try your first finished piece, explore guided kits, and let your mosaics move from practice into something permanent. Shape the gaps. Let's change the world